Welcome back to the WildChat. We're missing one member, Ashley, today, but it's still Dylan and I here. Just wanted to remember Big Ten season underway, kind of getting into the swing of things, right? Northwestern lost their first game against Rutgers. Dylan, we were both there. What was the vibe going on? What was the game like? Talk to me.
I went into that game extremely excited that football was back, extremely hopeful that Northwestern might be able to win a Big Ten game, and I left that game with a sunburn and disappointment. So that's the big thing that I think happened in Rutgers. Northwestern got absolutely dominated. Thought it was going to be a close game. It absolutely wasn't. Northwestern couldn't get anything going offensively the entire game. The defense wasn't great in the first half. They looked a little bit better in the second half. Not sure if that was, the defense improving or whether that was, the Rutgers offense taking it a little bit easier with a big lead. But just not a good game. Nothing great going on in it. And you just have to think what is going to happen from here if you're Northwestern.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think the thing for Northwestern against Rutgers that was really disappointing for me is that there weren't any expectations coming into this year. Obviously, after everything that's happened in the offseason, it's been said a million times, right? Pat Fitzgerald no longer with the team. And you're kind of like, what is Northwestern going to be this year? And somehow, even with no expectations, Northwestern fell short of that, right? They just fell flat. And I think that's the simplest way to say. The offense did not look good. The opening drive I thought looked good too. Maybe Ben Bryant to AJ Henning. That was a little bit exciting. But after that, there just really wasn't anything to write home about offensively. I thought the offensive line was really, really poor. They weren't able to give Ben Bryant any time in the pocket. They weren't creating any running lanes for Cam Porter. You look at the numbers. I think it was 22 carries for 12 yards in total for this Northwestern team. And that includes Ben Bryant being sacked a lot of times. So there just wasn't much productivity from that offensive line. But I think for me, it was more about the defensive line. There were no sacks, no pressure at all. They turned Gavin Wims at the Rutgers starting quarterback into, a strength for that Rutgers team. And he's arguably one of their biggest offensive weaknesses this season. So, this Northwestern team needs to wake up. And they really do, because there was almost nothing to show from that game in Piscataway that they can have a legitimate season. They can, really go on and try and, win a couple games. And of course, this Northwestern team wasn't expected to win 5, 6, 7 games this year. They're much more in that 2 to 4 range, but 2 is now looking a little bit less promising. And especially this week against UTEP, a game against a non-Power 5 opponent, a game that should be deemed winnable on the schedule. It's going to be interesting to see how Northwestern can cope, especially after a week where they just fell flat. But I think another thing that I thought was interesting, and I think you brought this up a little bit when we were just kind of talking about what we'd want to talk about, but kind of David Braun's, attitude going to the game, especially with some of the trickery that he decided to go with that fake punt. And why don't you kind of give your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it shows signs if you're having to, go for some trickery like that. I think it shows signs of a team that really has nothing to lose. And I think that's almost the way that Northwestern is kind of going into the season thinking is, hey, we have nothing to lose. Let's just try everything that we've got possible. I didn't mind the idea of the fake punt with Hunter Renner. I thought it was executed pretty well. I believe it was Rod Hurd who had the catch and just went out of bounds basically a yard too early. I think if he basically just ran straight ahead, straight vertically, he probably picks up the first down, but he went kind of more diagonal route towards the sidelines, stepped out of bounds just before the first down. I was there. From my view, I thought he got it. Clearly didn't, but I was excited. I liked the idea. If we see more trickery, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that in the future, but just kind of a sign of a team that has nothing to lose, in my opinion.
And then, there's obviously not necessarily a quarterback controversy, but there kind of is a quarterback controversy in a way, because we saw Ben Bryant in the first half, and I thought he was actually really impressive. Arm talent's there, definitely looked good and comfortable in the pocket. But as soon as that offensive line started to break down and the wide receivers couldn't make some catches, the accuracy wasn't as good, and he kind of, got a little bit frazzled and dazzled. There was one play with botched snap kind of, and then he ended up kind of in the frantic moments just throwing the ball away, and it got picked off. And, that last drive of the game where Brendan Sullivan had an opportunity, it's a touchdown drive for Northwestern. David Braun during the week kind of made it clear that Ben Bryant is the guy moving forward. But is there kind of a door open for Brendan Sullivan? What do you think Northwestern should do, with the quarterback situation?
Yeah, so it's hard to place a lot of blame on Ben Bryant, I think, because the offensive line was just so bad. I think that first drive we saw, he had a nice completion to AJ Henning, and that was a time where we're like, okay, wait, do we have something cooking on offense? And then you proceed to get three straight passing plays of no yards gained. Thought that was a little bit disappointing. AJ Henning is going to make a big difference in this offensive game. He was constantly getting separation. He was constantly open. But a big issue was the offensive line just wasn't giving Ben Bryant enough time to get that ball out. And another issue was the offensive line was not allowing the run game to get going. And if you don't have a run game that is going to work, your passing game is just going to struggle. I think it says a lot that Northwestern's leading rusher in that game was Brendan Sullivan. Brendan Sullivan was the quarterback for one drive, had 4 carries for 11 yards, and that was our leading rusher for the game. You're not going to win any football games if that's the case. Cam Porter was a guy who I said was going to hopefully be a difference maker and ultimately came up short. I'm not going to place that blame on Cam Porter. I'm going to place that blame on the offensive line because it was so bad. So, yes, Ben Bryant needs to make some better throws. His accuracy wasn't necessarily the greatest, but the offensive line is terrible. For that reason, I think that Brendan Sullivan, with his mobility, might be able to work out a little bit better. We did see Ben Bryant use his feet, pick up some yards at certain times in the game, but just not nearly enough to escape the pocket with the way the offensive line was collapsing. I know we're going to see Ben Bryant again next, or I guess technically tomorrow against UTEP. I don't know what to expect. If we see Brendan Sullivan come in the second half because the offensive line is struggling again, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. But yes, I do agree that you can't really take out your starting quarterback after one game, but just curious to see where we go from here.
I think that's a very, very fair point. And I mean, it all starts with that offensive line. It really does. I mean, it's no joke that teams build in from the trenches and then build out. And right now, this offensive line did not look good. They need to really improve if this offense really wants to get anything moving. I mean, if you just even look at the disparity between pass plays and run plays, it was 40 passing plays to 22 running plays. I mean, that's not something that Northwestern can do. They need to be balanced and they need to be effective, and that just shows a team that's unbalanced and ineffective. So I think the offense, we've kind of delved into that a little bit, but defensively too, I thought there was a lot going on in that game against Rutgers, and some good and some very bad. And I don't know if you want to start with the very good or the very bad, but I'll let you take that one.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that stands out to me in this game was Northwestern limited the big plays. To me, that's the most important thing. Rutgers, I don't believe, had a single play that went more than 20 yards during the entire game. It was just very slow, methodical drives that kind of hurt Northwestern. These were run plays that were picking up 4 or 5 yards per game. I think a lot of that was the defensive line not able to really get a lot of pressure. But good on Northwestern for really limiting those big plays. The secondary kind of held its job a little bit. We weren't able to get off the field a lot on third down and fourth downs early on in the game, but in the second half, we really switched that up, and the team was able to finally start, getting some stops, making some plays. Bryce Gallagher had a tremendous game with 19 tackles. He was just literally everywhere on that field. He was just filling those gaps, getting those tackles, getting the spot where the ball was. I think he's the bright spot of the game. I mean, we said that in our pregame against Rutgers that Bryce Gallagher was going to be that one guy defensively to kind of step up and have those big moments. I think he did that again. You need him again to just continue to almost improve, because having one guy defensively just be great isn't going to really do you a ton. But there were some other guys. I know you are a big fan of Devin Turner's game and what you saw from him. So why don't you go ahead and tell what you saw from him?
Yeah, Devin Turner. I mean, this secondary, just in general, I thought actually played pretty well. It might have looked a little bit uglier than it actually was, just because there was absolutely no pressure on Gavin Wimsatt, and he had all the time in the world. And eventually, if you wait 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds, any quarterback at any level of college can find somebody that's open. So that was a little bit frustrating, but I thought Devin Turner played a really good game overall. 5 total tackles, but more importantly, it was just all across the field. Kind of had that instinctive, ball-seeking ability, and not necessarily, coming away with interceptions. I think there were a couple plays where he could have had his hands on one, but wasn't able to corral them. But just nose around the football, and that's kind of similar to Bryce Gallagher too. 19 tackles for him, career high, as you mentioned. And those two guys are two guys that are really interesting for me moving forward with this Northwestern defense. There are two guys to really build around, a lot of confidence with them. Both played really excellent games. So I think against a team like UTEP, with receivers that aren't as good as Rutgers, not as many weapons on the outside. Those are really leaders in that second level of the defense, at least with Devin Turner and then, Bryce Gallagher trying to stop that run game. Those are two guys that Northwestern really needs to build around and build a lot of confidence around. Because other than that, I mean, this team doesn't have a lot going for it right now. They need those positive players and positive plays, and those two guys were making those positive plays as much as possible. So I think, that game against Rutgers was a letdown. It really was. And it's kind of frustrating because one winnable game, was Northwestern really expected to win it? Probably not. But it feels like a disappointment, even though that there weren't any expectations and there wasn't really a reason for us to think there would be any success. But turning it forward thinking here, Northwestern, faces UTEP tomorrow. I'm pretty sure it's an 11 o'clock game, right? Am I going crazy?
I feel like it's
11 o'clock.
I think it's
it might be later.
2:30 Central Time. I think it's 2:30 Central Time because I'll be at the Miami Texas A&M game. So thank goodness I won't be able
never
to
mind. It
watch.
might be a 2:30 Central Time game, which is nice. It means I can kind of relax a little bit here. Don't have to get up too early on a Saturday afternoon. But they open the weeks as actually not favorites, but UTEP is favored by 1.5 points on the road in Evanston. And when David Bryant was asked about that at his press conference, he basically said, I don't really care, and I don't look at betting odds and anything like that, and that's completely fair. But it's still interesting to kind of see that this team at home against a non-Power 5 opponent is not favored.
And I hate to say it, I'm not surprised. I am not surprised that Northwestern is not favored to win this game because they don't deserve to be. They didn't show anything against Rutgers that makes them deserve to be favored to win a football game. And I'm glad David Bryant said that. I don't want my coach really looking at outside perspectives and what other people care about his program, because realistically, the only person that should be caring about, that program and what people think from the outside is the outside perspective. I want David Bryant to focus on football, focus on winning a football game, because that's the only thing that should be mattering to him. This UTEP team is a team that will most likely run the ball a lot. They come in 1-1, just beat Incarnate Word. They lost to Jack State, which is, you should be thinking that Northwestern should be winning a game against a team that lost to Jack State. But the run game is going to worry me if this defensive line, can't get this initial pressure, get into the backfield, get some negative yards happening. I'm really worried to kind of see what's going to happen. You need, once again, Bryce Gallagher to step up, make some tackles, help out in the run game there. But to say I'm confident in a win, no, I'm definitely not. I'm a little bit worried. I think we could see an 0-2 Northwestern after this week.
And that's a really scary sight because you look at the schedule and Northwestern's schedule does not get easier after this. They're not going to be favored in any games, maybe besides the game against Howard at home later this year in the first week of October. But I mean, in the next couple of weeks, it's UTEP tomorrow. Then they play Duke next weekend, and that's not going to be a win. Duke is looking very good, obviously coming off that week 1 win against Clemson, and their offense was on full display. Minnesota's always a tough battle. I think that they'll probably take Northwestern at home on September 23rd, and then obviously Penn State comes into town, and that's another tough one. So this Northwestern team, this is really one of those games where it's if they don't win this one, they're not winning for the next couple of weeks because they've shown nothing that they can win. And it kind of makes it feel like this is a must-win game. And it's not really a must-win game for the fact that this team needs, has those bowl aspirations or wants to make that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 win season, right? That's not going to happen. That's not what this team is. They of course that their goal is to make a bowl game, right? That's every team's goal. But in all reality, that's not happening. This game is a must-win game for the program in general. After what happened this offseason, it's very hard to measure what success looks like for a team that's gone through everything this Cats team has gone through. But at the same time, a win is still a win. That's a building block. And when you've hit rock bottom, which this team has, and week 1 showed nothing that they're climbing up the ladder, a win is just, a little block to build off of and kind of move forward and kind of, go back up the ladder. But going back to UTEP, This is a team that, as you said, really, really run heavy team. They rushed for 329 yards last week, only threw for 94 yards. And I would say that even with that, I'm still not, I'm still a little bit worried about their quarterback situation too, because Gavin Hardison, their starter, has an arm. He threw only 13 passes last week, 94 yards, but 2 touchdowns. He's got a laser cannon attached to his arm. And that's something that Northwestern has to be aware of. So they've got a capable passer, capable runner, and then you've got to think about the offensive line too for them, which is actually kind of interesting because in pass protection, they've been quite weak, and they've kind of struggled in that regard. But running the football, obviously, they've been fantastic. So my guess is UTEP is going to really lean on running the football, really dive into that. And that's something where Northwestern's defensive line and linebackers, of course, Bryce Gallagher doing everything that he's done over the past time at his in his Northwestern career, but most importantly last week during his career game, to really slow down, especially Deion Hankins, who rushed for 24 carries for 174 yards last week. So he's the guy to watch in that UTEP backfield. But overall, this team's going to really try and run the ball down Northwestern's throats. And that makes me a little worried because last week against Rutgers, we saw those long, time-consuming drives, Northwestern unable to get off the field. And if UTEP is having success running the football, those drives are going to eat away at the clock. And it's going to be really hard for Northwestern to really get any momentum. And that was kind of the struggle in Piscataway last weekend, where, Rutgers scored on the opening drive. Northwestern had a solid-ish drive where they showed some promise, but couldn't really get a spark. And then Rutgers came down and scored again. Then it was 14-0. And then Northwestern was behind the clock, and they had to throw the ball to kind of get out of things. But it didn't really work. So that's kind of my concern. Dylan, what are your concerns heading to this game? I don't know if you're more Northwestern-oriented or more UTEP-oriented, but why don't you just share those thoughts?
My main concern is just everything Northwestern. I think it's going to be that way really until we see this team kind of turn something around. I think that the defense is going to struggle, but for some reason I'm optimistic that the defense can kind of build off of the stronger second half that they had against Rutgers. So in a sense, I almost somewhat feel confident that the defense can turn things around and prevent UTEP's run game from really digging deep and, causing some serious damage. If they decide to rely a little bit more on the passing game, then I might get a little bit more concerned. But I think that's more where I'm standing is I think our defense might be able to hold their own. It's a question of whether the offense can do anything and get going and score with more than 19 seconds left in a football game.
Fair enough. So turning our attention really now to this UTEP game, score predictions. What are you thinking? Is this a Northwestern win? Is this a Rutgers? Is this a UTEP win? Excuse me. Where's your head at?
If you asked me before that Rutgers game, I would say Northwestern's winning the game. I have turned very pessimistic lately. I am going to predict a UTEP winning. I think it will probably be another low-scoring game just because Northwestern's not going to really score many points. I'm probably going to say UTEP 20. I'm going to get weird with it. I'm going to say UTEP 23, Northwestern 14.
Okay, so we've got one UTEP victory prediction. I'm going to take another UTEP victory prediction because that game in Rutgers was ugly. I don't know how I stayed until the end, especially in the blaring sun.
It was terrible,
unbelievably warm. I thought Rutgers was kind of a cool stadium though, and they kind of had some good vibes there.
I didn't love it. I also didn't love them calling us Northeastern.
Oh well, yeah, that happened too. That was quite funny. But still, I'm still taking UTEP here. I think I'm going to take UTEP 20-10. I'm just really worried about that run game from UTEP. I think if they score an early touchdown on a long time consuming first quarter drive, it takes up 5, 6, 7 minutes of clock. They run the football 10 times, throw it a couple times too. I don't think Northwestern can really have that momentum that they need to kind of try and get back into things and back in the game because it wasn't there against Rutgers, and nothing against Rutgers made me really have any hope that we could see that against UTEP. So we're both taking UTEP. So hopefully, I guess either way, something good's going to happen. Either we're right or Northwestern wins. So that's one way to positively look at the negative. But nonetheless, just wanted to remind you guys that the WildChat is a member of the Big Banter family. If you're interested in any more Big Banter content, podcast, website, all that good stuff, you can look at bigbantersports.com, follow Big Banter on Twitter. Also, don't forget to follow the WildChat on Twitter, and obviously subscribe to our YouTube channel to be alerted of all our new podcasts. We're going to be trying to kind of spread our podcast over to Spotify too. We're trying to get that working and under construction. Hopefully we get Ashley on the next one. She had to fly up to Boston, see a friend, Northwestern football, WildChat, Boston to see friend. Why would anyone go to Boston? I don't know. Anyway, it's kind of a debatable choice, right, Dylan?
Oh yeah, for sure.
For sure. Nonetheless, until next time, it's been great talking Northwestern football, and can't wait to have you guys listen to us soon.